Be right now if Vicki thinks we're ready.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes, everybody, you're free to start.
I want to welcome everyone to the BVNPT Executive Committee meeting on Thursday, September 2 at 1 p.m. And this is our call to order. Elaine, would you like any members of the board to introduce themselves, or can we just go ahead and go for the operations report?
At this point, actually, we don't have any additional board members. The reasoning behind having it open, according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act for the last couple of meetings, was so that any other board members could participate in discussions about specifically our sunset legislation. And since that's no longer on the agenda, at least not as far as changing, we are no longer subject to that. So we don't, my own long-winded way of saying we don't have any additional board members.
Awesome. Then I will turn the operations report over to you.
Great. The obviously, we have the usual comings and goings, but the big news right now that we want to make sure the execs knew is that like all the other state entities, BVNPT and DCA as a whole are working to implement the mandatory COVID testing. So I don't know if Sac City is doing anything like this, but what we've been told is that our staff was given the option to verify that they had been fully vaccinated, or if they have not or do not choose to verify that, they will be subject to weekly mandatory COVID testing. It'll be on site here for our team, and I think actually we've made arrangements so that if necessary, any other DCA neighbors in our building, the contractors, the court reporters, they could actually go through our testing here rather than just set up another shop, in their office. So that is expected to start no later than the 30th of this month. We've been working on getting everything put together. We have our own, we have a room set up. It was certified by DCA Central. And right now, we're looking at the list. We're being given a list every Friday of employees who are subject to the testing. And so as we get closer to that, I believe that actually probably next week I will send out a note to the whole staff saying that, if you have been vaccinated, make sure that you have documented that. If you do not choose to either get vaccinated or verify that, you will be subject to this testing requirement for as long as the governor says so. So that's really the bigger news. I have personally mixed feelings about this, but in the end, we will comply with what the governor's office says to do.
Thank you. We are not doing exactly that at Sac City, but I was contacted by the State Treasury Department asking if my students could come and do their testing.
Oh, how interesting. Interesting.
And we're going to do it. So, hey, great experience for the students.
How lucky for them.
It's our LVN students that volunteered. So I'm like, you guys are awesome.
We've got to be able to make some publicity hay out of that.
I doubt it.
And that's pretty much it for operations, unless you have any other questions or anything else that's going on.
Elaine, I did want to ask if does this mean everyone is coming back to the office? Is that why this is going to be enforced?
Almost everyone, because if we've been, oh good, Sheila is on, good. We've been very, very cautious, in moving back towards the on-site work, because there are some things that just absolutely can't be done via telework. And so we've got people ranging from almost all telework to almost all here. And because people like the special investigators, for example, a lot of they need to come in like once, maybe twice a week to meet, to print stuff out, and to make some stuff, to put some stuff together. But folks like, say, the licensing staff and the cashiering staff, that's not anything that they can take home. A lot of the analysts in enforcement, they have documents that have personally identifiable information. We can't have those files off-site. So we've been working on managing that flow. So we do have people who can work from home, but not all day, every day. And we're also, of course, the managers and supervisors have done a super job on making sure that they're accounting for their folks who are at home to make sure that they're actually working while working at home.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up in my own mind. Thank you. Are we ready to move on? Any
Sure
other
thing.
questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Great. Enforcement Division report, Ms. Wood.
Hi, this is Antoinette. I'm the Enforcement Division Chief. So for my report today, enforcement is doing very well. We are meeting all of our timelines currently, and it's predicted that we're going to continue to meet our timelines. We have noticed, I haven't gotten this month's numbers yet because we just closed, but it doesn't seem that we're getting all of the complaints we thought might come in after the state reopened. So our complaint numbers are holding fairly steady. The one thing I do want to note is that when we talked about the PSA for the suicide prevention, we had requested that the board vote on that matter. Basically, the reason for that is with communications, they had worked with another border bureau, and that border bureau, with another board, and that board, when given the PSA that they had done, the board decided that they were not committed to the idea and completely scrapped the whole project. And before comms moves forward with us and puts out the time and effort, they want to make sure that this is something the board really wants. So I kind of wanted to poll the two of you and see what you thought and what you thought where the board members were at with this.
I think the board members didn't have a clear sense of what you were trying to do. They got too caught up in the whole idea that it was a suicide video, and they didn't understand that you were going to create your own announcement.
So do you think we should take it back to the board and ask them what they think? Because what I don't want to do is spend a ton of time and effort on this and then have them say that they don't want to participate in it.
I think it should go back to the board. Mr. Durkin, what do you think?
I would tend to agree, just because there was some questions about really, what the final product was going to look like. So I agree.
Okay, we can take that back to the board, and I'll make sure that it's very clear about what we're looking for. Did you have any questions for the Enforcement Division?
None that I can think of.
All right, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Education Division report, Marie?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. I really, we're just moving along. I don't really have much of a report. I think I've said a lot at Education and Practice and at the board meeting. Our big focus right now is, and Carol, you know this, we spent a lot of time discussing our pilot program that we're hoping to have up and running. So that's been a lot of the focus, and just of course, the NECs just keeping the schools at bay, because we're hearing all sorts of reports. They're not able to get in clinical. They don't know what to do. So they're making requests of the NECs, which of course is very time consuming for them. But other than that, we're just pretty much status quo. And if Carol or John, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Marie, are people struggling because of this influx of the Delta variant? And I know some of the nursing homes have said you can't have clinical here. Is that the new struggle?
Yeah, that's it too, Carol. Plus, I think we're still getting the backflow from the, if you want to say, the original pandemic issues. I just don't think the clinical sites are necessarily opening fast enough. There's not as many of them for the students to go to. So, but I think with the upcoming variant, I think we're going to see, I think we're going to see the impact of that in the next coming months. So,
I agree.
yeah,
I agree.
I just, I just think we might have some problems with that coming up.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. Durking.
No, I have none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Licensing division report, Ms. Brown.
Hi. I don't have a lot to report, but we do have some licensing technician vacancies. And we recently hired a new supervising program technician too, Zeb Berkman. He was promoted last month from a PT2. We did have one of our licensing techs. She left state service and it was kind of sudden. So we have at least 2 vacancies right now to fill, one for Zeb and one for the person who left state service. We also completed interviews on Friday for a new equivalency analyst to replace Demery. And we've made an offer. We're just waiting for final approval. So it looks like we will have another program licensing technician vacancy, but we will be fully staffed. Our equivalency analysts will be fully staffed. So we're excited for that. All the staff are working in the office still. Our processing times are still fairly good, and our phone times are still great. So that's about all I have.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
No, sounds good. Thank you.
Budget and fiscal report, Ms. Yamaguchi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We spent a good amount of time at the board meeting talking about our existing fiscal issues and essentially looking at our present and future. And so I know that you've really looked at, I think the structure we know of and then the structure that we're hoping for. But then I think what's important for you to know right now, though, is that we are moving forward as quickly as we possibly can with the fee increase regulations. And what we need to start doing, probably working on it beginning next week, is a budget change proposal to put into effect the changes, principally staffing, that we believe we will need to do to comply with our sunset bill. I think I mentioned, I think we talked about that we see the need for 2 new NECs and I think one other additional analyst or support staff for the education. We haven't really worked out the details and the pacing, but obviously I think the workload is there. So we'll be working on putting that together. The timeline for that is really tight. And I was actually just reminded of this yesterday that has to be approved. That proposal has to be approved no later than 30 days after the bill's chaptered. So if the governor's deadline is October 10, and you figure 30 days out from that, so the very beginning of November. So we will have to do some quick work and move it through. So we'll be reporting to you again, I think probably the beginning of October at our next executive meeting. But beyond that, we've been looking at every single thing, and right now I think I know that Vicky has been working with the other managers and with Maggie Archibald, our HR liaison, to really look at our staffing picture and figuring out, how we're paying for things and making sure that everybody is doing the work that is appropriate to their position, that the program areas are balanced correctly and staffed correctly. So with that, let me pause for any questions.
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
As a footnote, I do want to, and we'll get into this in a bit, I do want to make our budget and fiscal whole processes and status part of our overall board training and orientation day. So,
I think that's a good idea.
yeah. You never know too much. And that's it for budget and fiscal then.
Thank you.
This is the big part. Yeah, so our bill was substantially amended in appropriations last week and is on the Senate floor pretty much as we speak. Unfortunately, the amendments weren't what we'd hoped for. And in fact, I think you might recall that we had been looking at, for example, the continuing approval fee for programs at a flat rate of $5,000 annually. And then I was told a bit later that, oh, the annual, that was a typo. We didn't mean for that. We want that fee structure to be based on your 4-year approval process cycle the way you originally wanted it. I said, but still at $5,000. He said, yes. I said, so principally 25% of what that version of the bill said. And they said, yes. And after I turned the microphone off for a few minutes, I said, okay, that's disappointing. And essentially I was told in nicer terms that people just didn't want to go from nothing to the fully developed fee structure that we had put together because they didn't believe that there was sufficient planning, implementation, etc., and that essentially people wanted something in statute, something, and I liken it to training wheels, and that it didn't preclude us from seeking legislation in a future date. So at this point, I think we're absolutely, going to have to make certain that the fee increase on the applicants and licensees is moved forward as quickly as we possibly can. That's hard, and I even made the unpleasant point that RN's licensing renewal fees are $190, and LVNs under this structure will be $300, and RNs oftentimes make twice what LVNs make. And they said, yeah, we know that. And I said, okay then. And so we moved on, and but there is some kinds of good parts in our sunset bill. I think the language put forward to help us redevelop our program approval process, while I think it's going to put a vast amount of pressure on Marie and the NECs, I think some of the language that they've given us helps us to, I think, work through a process and kind of use next year as kind of an experiment while we walk through the first half of the waiting list, if you will, and then while building back, because you'll recall we have kind of a plan for the competitive process that we would like to move into. So we think that the bill will let us do that Now, the interesting thing about this bill, and I gotta think that it's very, very rare because none of us have seen this happen. And that is that we got this piece of language that says that we can implement, we must implement emergency regulations and then also implement some changes via bulletins, advisories, and things like that. So that we're looking at this as kind of we didn't quite know how to fix this for you, Elaine. So we're gonna let you have a chance to fix it. And so I don't know. And you know, Ken, Sheila, you might, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that language, but it's a challenge because we need to move very quickly to get that language moved forward. But it's a interesting kind of opportunity, I think, for us to really explore what we can do and make that work towards the process we actually want in the end. So the upshot here is that, you know, assuming that this bill doesn't change again, and like I said, it's on the Senate floor, and once the Senate acts, it goes back to the Assembly for concurrence and then off to the governor's desk. So I don't think it's going to change again at all. So at this point, we need to make this bill work. It basically reauthorizes the board until January 1 of 2025. And that means that we would be having a sunset hearing and legislation in 2024, which means that we would be writing our review report in the end, you know, summer, fall of 2023, which essentially gives us about a year and a half to see how our experimental work with the school fees, the high fees of applicants and licensees, and the school approval process have worked out. It's going to be very, very tight. But I think it's doable. It's making us a little nervous, but I think it's doable. But like I said, Ken, Sheila, did you have any thoughts on if you've seen anything similar to this?
No, sorry, Elaine, not at this point. I
I
really
didn't think so.
this is a very unique situation. I hope you didn't-
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I agree with Sheila. It is pretty unique. The good part of this is that the bill would give the board considerable leeway in how it develops its procedures for school approvals. So there's an unusual amount of discretion that they're vesting in the board and allowing the board to accomplish it through something other than formal rulemaking. It's really quite unusual. And the extent of it, I haven't seen anything quite like it before. So it's good and it's bad because it does put the onus on the board to come up with these ideas and to implement them. You know, and there aren't the normal checks and balances that you'd have in a rulemaking process.
Right. So we've been working. The team's been working really on looking at everything we believe needs to be put either in the emergency regs or via a bulletin, or you know what needs to be put into a much more permanent format. And we'll be working with, you know, our team with council in the next couple weeks, and hopefully having something moving forward quickly, because this will need to be approved, at least the concepts of which will need to be approved by the board in November, so that we can move it through the official process. So questions on that?
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not sure if I should be happy or sad about it.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like we didn't get what we asked for, but there were some concessions.
You're right. It is a really odd thing because, like I said, my hunch here is that the legislature in the end just didn't know, well, more clearly, they did not know how to make everybody happy. So what they did was they put like I said, this kind of training wheels apparatus together for us, but then at the same time gave us this kind of unprecedented leeway to make something happen. So the next year and a half, 2 years are going to be critical, and we're going to be scrambling and working, very, very intensely to figure out how to play this forward because, I think, among other things, we're going to need to look into having an external fee study done whereby somebody explains or debunks the idea that the work that our NECs do is worth only 25% of what the NECs at BRN do. And the work that and the school programs that produce LVNs and PTs don't need to pay as much as the schools that produce RNs. So there's a lot going on that we need to, I think, work to bring together. Essentially, we're going to be shepherding a whole lot of information together to get ready for our next sunset. And I really, really thought I'd get kind of a victory lap year, but boy, no.
So rather unfortunate, the whole fee structure that they, said $5,000 for everybody.
You know what, and
I'm a little
that
taken
that's
back by
I was taken aback by that too, because in the end, and this is, not maybe the most politic thing I could say, but in the end, it didn't seem that the legislature was as interested in supporting public programs as private programs, and that was very dismaying for me.
That's interesting. I will tell you, they did do a questionnaire from the chancellor's office asking us about the fees. And the interesting thing is, all of the community colleges said we thought the fees were reasonable when it was going to be $5,000 every year. They all said that's reasonable and we don't have an objection.
Yeah. So I'm going to want to, get together with you, Carol, and really think through some ideas, because the way things have been constructed in this bill and are really, I think, overly supportive of the private sector. And like I said, I'm kind of dismayed by that. I would like to think through via, our education practice committee, some ways that we could provide some supporting ideas, concepts, policies for the public sector. So we'll be coming back to that.
Yeah, I also want to put out there that our OTA program, occupational therapy assistant, they pay, I think it's $3,800 every year. So when you guys said 5,000, I was like, well, that's right in line with everybody else. I think the PTA program, and I can find out how much they pay, but I think they also have a yearly fee.
Yeah.
And
So,
when you look at that, it's not, I don't think it's out of line that we asked for a yearly fee from the schools, even though I'm one of the schools would have to pay.
I agree. And, we had thought about that too. And we'd really, especially for the public programs, because, they're budgeting 2 years in advance. We want to provide that kind of planning window. So like I said, this is something that I think we as a board are going to have to get really creative on and involve some stakeholders.
Okay, so are there other questions?
Yeah, Elaine, I have a question if I may. So there was a committee report to appropriations. I am guessing. Was there anything telling in there or any issues that were raised that might be concerning?
No, actually not. And in fact, it's kind of funny because what they talked about were the issues that were covered in our hearing back in March, and they acknowledged that the board's committed to working on these things. They spent a little bit of time talking about the fee structure, but they didn't say anything really telling about this is too much or this is too little. They just basically explained the history of, the past at least 3 years where we've been asking for a fee structure. So it was puzzling because they're being very careful, I think, of what's being put in public eye. And in fact, the Department of Finance's analysis is based on the original version of the bill. And until they update that before it goes to the governor's desk, there's nothing here or there on their analysis too. And it would be very, very unusual for Department of Finance and the governor not to go ahead and support a sunset bill. I mean, we would have to be really, really troublesome for that to happen.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for that update.
Great.
All right. Board for accountability, Ms. Yamaguchi.
Great. Oh, thank you, Vicki. You always think for me. So here we have, of course, the most recent chart showing our board members' voting patterns. No real warning signals beyond what we've talked about in the past, and I think this is the pattern we've used for years. So I wonder at some point if you wanted to, for example, charge the enforcement committee with thinking different ways of reporting or different parameters. But I think for what we need to keep an eye on and for what I think the appointing authorities look for, this has always been adequate. And because those interim, 1 or 2 petitions that we've sent to board members with a fast ticking clock in between the bigger packets, it's hard to clock that. They're so irregular and they're so, it would, I don't know if what it would do to, any kind of statistical analysis. So, I mean, I'm not, absolutely unwilling to consider this, but I wonder, the better part of wisdom. And like I said, I think in the long run, this system has done really well for us because it contributes to the bigger picture, I think, of board member accountability that, we owe to, the appointing authorities and anybody who wants to file a PRA, for example. So I don't know. I mean, if you think it's worth further discussion, we certainly can do so. But I'm thinking it's not really necessary. And given the fact that I think all the committees are doing a lot of other things that are much more meaningful, I wouldn't advise it.
I think this is an adequate system, and I just wanted to have a shout out to Christine Dano for the day before our last ballot was due. She sent everybody an email and reminded people, and I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. So no, and I appreciate that so much, Dr. Mountain, because our staff works really, really hard to make sure that every possible outcome is accounted for. And I was teasing somebody earlier because I had like this new idea for a subtitle for duty statements, and that's board member concierge. And I know that our HR liaison actually gets that title, but I know that Christine does so much for the board members directly. I know that Vicki Saavedra here does so much with the board members directly, especially once we go back to traveling. We try really hard to make sure that you have to work really hard not to be able to be helped by our staff.
100% agree with that.
Thank you. Great. So, filing documents, I still have some outstanding documents from a couple of board members. Per diem, I know that we have just sent some paperwork your way. I'm not sure if that's gone back yet. Now, board member training, this is what I want. This is the fun part of the conversation. So I sent to you a draft document that by the way, Miss Lyman said, "You're not really going to call it speed dating, are you?" I said, "No, it's just for the purpose of discussion with the execs." So we put together this ideas for a day of training, the way we used to do it before COVID, based on the assumption and nobody's telling me anything different, and they won't until September 30th. So based on the assumption that we're able to have an in-person meeting up here in Sacramento in November, we can have the 1 day of training and then the 1 day of business meeting. And I really hope we can. And it would be even better if the governor's office is able to appoint at least a couple new board members. Because at this point, we have board members who have never laid eyes on each other, right? So we have to get back to the ability to work together as a team, and that's really suffered, I think, through this remote meeting. And I think it's probably fair to guess that even moving forward, we're probably still going to have some kind of a hybrid system of some meetings in person in public meetings and others being via WebEx or something. So I think it's fair to say that we're going to move cautiously to going back to the public meetings. But can I get the document back, Vicki?
Can I just say, I thought that the speed dating was kind of cute.
There we go. So yeah, so see, here's the concepts that we had talked about. The first thing would be the very first thing. So we would let the board members just chat with each other, 5-10 minutes each, and we would give them this list of a little bit about me, why I applied for the board, and then the one thing that I just don't get, which would be, I think, because I really want to be able to help the newer board members get more acclimated, but I also know that the more seasoned board members, there's still a couple little things that they just could use a little bit more of an explanation for, or even can I ask advice on this, or what have you found about this? So yeah, so session 1 for like maybe an hour or so, the board members get to know each other. So session 2, I think we would probably space this out, like maybe make that the one right after lunch or something, so that we got people moving again. That the board members work with the management team, and we talk a little bit about what do I do? Who am I? What I do, and then the board members could maybe draft, have like a little cheat note for themselves of 3 things I want to understand from each of these, leaders. But then I think, this is not in any set sequence. These are just the ideas that kind of occurred to us, and we thought. So truthfully, I think, this board member 101 would probably be the second thing after the board members were working on getting to know each other. So can you scroll down a little bit, Vicki?
That's the end of the document, Elaine.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's on me. Thank you.
Where would you like for it to go? Do you want me to scroll up a little bit more?
No, that's fine. So yeah, so board member 101, we would have the basics of, here's your mission. This is something that people should have learned when they were being appointed. Maybe that we could have somebody from the department, somebody from agency, maybe somebody from the governor's office appointments. We could maybe even do a panel with folks just to talk about what a board member's job is, what your main mission is, the duties and responsibilities, and then spend some time looking at our committee structures and the roles. I think the board did a really good job over the past couple of years in refining the structure and roles. We just now need to make sure that we can appoint the folks so that we have the full committees running and that they're doing their work. So I see that as like the next big thing, and that's the dry part. But then directly into BVNPT, the up close personal. So we'd show the org chart, we'd talk about the budget and fiscal, and then we would talk in depth about the strategic plan, because at this point, there's really only a few of you that participated in the original strategic plan development. So we'd probably want to walk through I've been pussyfooting all year about, because I want to do, the analysis and the status planning and updating of the strategic plan, but because of everything else, we haven't. And now that we're due several new board members, I think it's probably, again, we need to push it back, but then it makes more sense then really to spend some time talking about the existing plan and things that have changed in the world. So we spend some time on that, and then a real brief thing of, well, we just came off sunset and we're planning for the next one right now. Then I'd want to allow the program areas a little bit of time each to talk a bit about, what we do and what we need board members to be very aware of, and how they can be interactive. For example, for education, I want to, this has been something that's been worrying me, and that's that I don't think every board member really understands how to read the reports the NECs present. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time with one or more of them walking through here's this point, this means this. We need you to look at this. And bluntly, I want to be able to have, I think, a discussion point about these schools. I want the schools to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountable, I think, to the board, and not just, come and say, oh, we know that our pass rates have been terrible for 3 years, but you shouldn't put us on provisional yet. And have half the board think, okay, whatever. And the other half board going, no, that's ridiculous. So like I said, the whole idea for all the programs really is really to be able to present to the board members how you read these reports, how you look at and evaluate the recommendations that staff makes, where you should be asking questions of, of the staff and of the management of, did you think about this? Is that this? Can you point me the differences between this and this? Because like I said, I worry sometimes, and it's kind of on the one hand, I think our staff does a really good job in putting everything down on paper, and so that should shorten conversations. I mean, there should be no abstract conversation, or but on the other hand is, are we also making sure that everyone is following that, and reading all the reports and understand everything that's being presented there? So like I said, I want to figure out ways to really, I think, call this out a little bit more, and essentially, this is training and orientation for the board members, so that they can understand and really their role, because truthfully, the board sets our policy. The board is in charge of this, and in doing so, the board directs me to do things to make, to fulfill our mission and our strategic plan. And so it shouldn't be the other way around, of course. So it shouldn't be me telling the board, yeah, we need to do this, and the board saying, oh, okay. I mean, and that's not what's been happening, I think, over the past year and a half. But the reality is that I feel like I want the board to be a little more engaged, and, feel free to question. So is there anything that I missed, though, that you would really like us to put some time into on that day?
I actually really liked the agenda when I looked through it, and I think that you will answer a lot of questions. But as far as engagement, I really believe that COVID and having been continuously online is one of the most disengaging experiences people have had. And I think we're really seeing the fallout of that now. And I think people are tired. I see it in every meeting I'm in all the time. People are tired.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. Mr. Deerking, do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, no, it looks good to me.
Okay. But yeah, there's no doubt that, you know, it would be a much more interpersonal and active conversation if we were all in the same room.
And I felt like we had that up until COVID. We had a very interactive board, and it's just difficult in this situation. You know, it's just very difficult because
It is. It's so distracting to, you know, oh wait, did I raise my hand? Oh wait, did I? Yeah, I know it is distracting and difficult. So I'm hopeful.
Me too.
Yeah, good.
But I really like this, and I think I really thought that the speed dating thing was cute. I don't think you should take it. Sorry. I think it lightens it up a little bit. You know, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of, hey, it's okay. We're just getting to know each other. That's all.
Yes. Right.
I liked it when they did it at NCSBN. It was fun.
It was fun. Yeah. So good. Okay, so then we will we'll work on making this, you know, an agenda, and we'll be putting that, we'll fold that into the November board agenda. Obviously that it's, you know, subject to public meeting laws, but you know, if it's on the agenda as, you know, board member orientation and training, I don't know how many people are going to want to be in the audience to watch, you know, board member speed dating. But you never know, because I'm sure parts of it will be interesting to listen to. But yeah, we'll understand how that goes. Good.
Okay.
That
Are we gonna determine our next meeting?
that would probably be a really good idea. That's a great question. I think calendar here. Obviously, you know, a lot of things are going to be decreed by September 30 with regard to, you know, the emergency orders. The governor's deadline, of course, is, you know, Sunday the 10th, helpful. So I would think then that there's a lot to be said for meeting either the week of October 4 or the week of October 11.
I'm gonna vote for the week of October 11. The week of October 4, we are all hoping that they're gonna have the, it's a big COADN, CACN joint conference, whether it's online or in person, we're all hoping that it actually happens.
Okay.
So it's just a big update for the whole state, and it's pretty important at this point.
Absolutely then. So that gives us like Thursday the 14th.
That's fine with me.
Mr. Deerking, does that work for you?
14th looks like it works for me too. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay. To the same bat time and the same bat channel. Obviously, you know, we'll be finalizing the November agenda. So we'll probably walk through that. But is there anything on that you'd like to cover at this point that we haven't put on the agenda? Because the agenda we had today is probably pretty much, you know, your basic executive committee agenda. But is there anything that you would like to start discussing or having a report on?
It seems like our plate is pretty full as it is, so.
It is.
I agree with that.
Okay. Well, and obviously, of course, if anything interesting crops up, we'll let you know.
Sounds good.
Madam Chair, this is Ken Swenson. I had something I would suggest we put on the October Executive Committee agenda. The board will be receiving a scope of practice inquiry fairly soon involving school nurses administrating medicinal cannabis to primary and secondary students.
Ooh.
And so there's going to be an inquiry from a law firm that represents many school districts in California that will be referred in the normal course of business to the NECs for review, but I think it's a matter that the board may want to take a formal position on, as opposed to an informal response by an NEC. So I'm suggesting two things at this point. One, that we put the matter on the executive committee calendar for the next meeting, and that when the inquiry comes in, that it be referred to the Education and Practice Committee to take up at the October 27th meeting.
Mr. Swenson, will there be additional description and information? I mean, cannabis is a pretty broad term, and what it's being used for and how it's being synthesized are important components when you're considering giving medication to children.
This will be in response to a specific inquiry regarding the administration of cannabis through drops or through a nose spray to a particular student who suffers from a type of epilepsy that is treated with this product.
Okay.
And I can let you know that in the context of a fair hearing from a case involving the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, the Office of Administrative Hearings has rendered an opinion in a case that was an appeal from the denial of free appropriate public education. In the particular case involving an individualized education plan, where the administrative law judge in that case opined, interestingly enough, that it was proper under federal and state law for administration of this particular treatment as part of an individualized education plan, and apparently also opined that it was within the scope of practice for registered nurses and licensed vocational nurses, which is rather strange because obviously the board wasn't asked about this particular issue, and it's within the board's jurisdiction exclusively. So at any rate, there is a decision in a previous case involving this issue. It's come up again in a new case. The firm that represents the majority of local school districts as general counsel reached out to us about this issue. They'll be sending a formal request for a scope of practice opinion that will be very specific in nature, describing the condition, the medication, and other specific elements of the fact pattern, giving rise to the request for an opinion, as well as a copy of the decision that was rendered in the other case. So I mainly wanted to put this on the executive committee's radar. It hasn't come in yet. I anticipate it will be coming in. And of course, I will immediately transmit that. And I guess the most appropriate person for the request to be directed to is probably the chair of the Education and Practice Committee, I would imagine. But there'll be a request coming in short order, but I wanted to give it a heads up about that. And since there's not that much time between the next executive committee meeting and the Education and Practice Committee meeting on October 27th, I wanted to give it a heads up because that will probably be something that the executive committee will want to refer to the Education and Practice Committee for review when it comes in.
Thank you. All right, are there further suggestions for future agenda items?
I have none, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Yamaguchi, anything further?
No, that sums it up for us.
All right, then I guess we are adjourned at 1:55 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate it.
everyone.
Thank you as
Have a
always.
good
Have a good day, folks. Thanks.
All right, stay
Bye.
safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. This meeting has ended.